this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
5 receivers at Duncan's disposal. Duncan stepping up. Hit! Ball is loose!
Big call here.
Marshall thinks they have it, and the Herd do!
Here's the kickoff from Amaretto Curry to the Hilltoppers, and we are underway, and a fake reverse on the kick return. And here comes Townsend down the left sideline. What a way to start it for Western Kentucky on the road, and it is an opening touchdown return, and just like that, the Hilltoppers strike first.
Justin Rohrwasser to try to win it for Marshall from 53 yards out. It's got the leg. It is good! And the perfect season continues for Justin Rohrwasser.
Goes for 2. Going for the win. Western Kentucky going for the victory. Rolling to his right, quick strike, and they did it! Western Kentucky has ended the perfect season into the hands of Willie McNeil. A shocker here in West Virginia, and it is over for Marshall. They end the regular season 11-1.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. The next installment of our series of position group breakdowns brings us back to Huntington, brings Trace back to the podcast. And this week we're talking about Marshall's offensive line and the running back unit. So 2 highly productive units for a number of years for the Herd. And there are some big questions to be answered this season, 2021. And well, Trace and I are going to do our best to try to answer those questions, or at least talk through the issues where we think the bottleneck may occur. Trace, we're going to talk offensive line first. It's been like super strong point for the Herd for, God, really like the last decade almost. I mean, they've been good for a long time. So some not much of a shakeup, I guess you could say, but a big enough of a shakeup. Some things are going to have to go right. Some key components have gone, but there is a lot of talent returning on a very experienced Herd offensive line. That should be one of the tops, if not the top offensive line in Conference USA once again. Phil still ranks this unit tied for second in Conference USA with UTSA and 56th nationally. So like we say before, anytime you can land as a G5 school, a nationally ranked unit in one of Phil Still's rankings, you're doing something right. And 56 is nothing to sneeze at. Yeah, that's a little bit better than half when you talk about 130-ish odd teams in the country. But this is just a good offensive line. And they've proven this is not a fluky thing. They're just good year in and year out. The Herd has really prided itself on quality offensive line play. Recruiting has been a real emphasis at the offense at all offensive line positions, and they've paid a lot of dividends for the Herd. You're only as good as your offensive line in most cases. So total on the Herd Zone roster as we record this podcast today is 20 offensive linemen on the roster, and it's a fairly good breakup by class. According to Herd Zone, this is either senior or red shirt, whatever the year, junior, red shirt, whatever. So senior or red shirt, seniors 4, juniors, red shirt, juniors 4, sophomores, red shirt, sophomores 3, and 9 freshmen or red shirt freshmen. Little senior thin, but all the seniors are very experienced and are all projected starters. I don't unless something crazy happens, all 4 of those guys will be starting in some capacity throughout the season or for the entire season if they can stay healthy. Trace, before we get into the portal and losses and things like that, talk to me about this Herd offensive line, where you see it this season versus years past, how you're feeling about it as a whole. Is there, you see any drop off potentially, or is it kind of business as usual in your eyes for the Herd?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a really good offensive line yet again. I mean, I feel like every year we do these previews and, it's always number 2 in the conference, number 1 in the conference. And that's a testament to how much talent they've had on the O-line. I mean, I think even though, there are a couple big losses there, Kane Madden and Josh Ball, and and of course those are big losses, but this unit has a lot of talent still. Plus, with a new addition, a new addition or two, probably going to make a very big impact with the returning guys they have. I think it's business as usual, like you just said. That's what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be another just recent trend of great success for the Herd O-line, and that bodes really well for the running game coming up. What we're going to talk about later in the show, because Brendan Knox is gone. Some of those other guys that haven't got as many reps are going to need reps now, and or more reps. They're going to get more reps. They're going to need help from the O-line. Same thing goes with Grant Wells as well. So, yeah, business as usual. I think they're going to have a big year. I really do.
Well, I hope it's business as usual, because we do have some questions that are going to need answered as far as running backs go. Who is going to ultimately end up by the end of the season having the lion's share of carries? We'll get into that as we go down the road and talk about the running backs in the latter half of this episode. But for offensive line, you mentioned it. A couple of huge splashes, both in the portal and via the draft, the NFL draft. Kane Madden was an All-American by a lot of outlets, and of course he hit the portal and is now going to play his ball at Notre Dame. And speaking of ball, Josh Ball, the mountain of a man, decided to test the NFL waters and got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. So he's also gone. So the Herd loses two starters off of that offensive line, and they hit the portal and got a couple of guys to come in, namely from North Carolina, the hometown kid, Huntington High School product, Billy Ross, who was very highly recruited coming out of high school. And it's nice to see Billy come back and play some ball in Huntington. We've said over a number of years, if Marshall just would have been able to recruit and land the myriad of talented offensive linemen that had come out of Huntington High School in Spring Valley over the last 4 or 5, 6 years, it would have been amazing, because these guys have gone on to play at big time schools. So it's just a testament to the high school talent that's being produced in the offensive line department right there in Cabell County. It's pretty amazing stuff. So a big getting Billy Ross back. Also coming over from Purdue is a converted defensive lineman. He was a defensive lineman at Purdue, or at least on the roster as a defensive lineman. That's Stephen Faucheux. He's going to play offensive line for the Herd. He's a pretty big guy too, 6'5", 293. Billy Ross checking in 6'5", 320. You lose two and you get two. So I hope that you're right, that it is business as usual, but we shall see. Let's talk about some projected starters, Trace. A lot of familiar names with Herd fans, because these guys have just flat out played a lot of ball over the last 4 or 5 years, 3, 4, 5 years. Alex Millette, redshirt senior, 6'3", 294 pounds. Remember that stat that came up about Alex and PFF? It was just like the only offensive lineman in the country that played like 400 snaps and didn't allow a sack. I mean, that's freaking amazing. That is amazing. And to be the only guy in the country to do that is even more amazing. Will Ulmer, another redshirt senior, 6'5", 314, played a lot of ball for the Herd. Very, very talented guy. The chemistry between Millette, Ulmer, and Alex Seguera, who will play center again, is really second to none in this conference. And then you got to talk about, what are these last 2 slots on the offensive line look like? Because if you're like us and we like to trust what Phil Steele puts out in his book, I don't know what to believe right here, because he does have Billy Ross penciled in as one of the 5 starters, which I can absolutely see happening. But the 5th starter, he has this Tarek Adams. And I thought, okay, great. I thought, something was, maybe he wasn't there anymore. And I went and checked the Herd's own roster when I was looking, and Tarek Adams isn't on the roster. So is he playing for the Herd? Is he not playing for the Herd? I don't really know. So somebody's got the information wrong, and I would think that it's Phil Steele that's got it wrong. I would trust the Herd's own roster. So with that question, who's that 5th offensive lineman, Trace? Who's it going to be? We've seen some younger guys get a spattering of playing time over the past couple of years in mop-up duty and in, just giving guys a breather. But who do you think that might be? Who off the top of your head do you think is the guy if in fact Tarek Adams isn't on the roster anymore?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tricky one, because I mean, I think we've all seen a lot of stuff about Tarek Adams. His body physically being, beat up recently, like over the last year or two. Like he's not holding up as well physically just because of all the injuries he's taken and stuff. So I mean, I don't think he's gonna probably be on the roster, or I don't think it's gonna be the case. And I'm just sitting here looking at this magazine, looking at Phil Still's listings, and I really don't know. I really do not know who that guy could be. I mean, four of the guys you can see without a doubt that are going to be, potential starters. But after that, just a lot of names. I mean, a lot of names that, quite frankly, I'm not sure which one's going to be the one. I mean, and I don't, we sometimes we come on here and everybody just assumes we have to, we know everything and we know what we're going to say and whatever. So I don't know who the heck it's going to be.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to, hide around that. I don't know. Maybe the more I look at these names, something might come to me. But right now, they have a lot of younger guys sitting back on the wings that could step up too. But it's kind of a good problem to have on one side of the equation. The other side is, well, maybe it isn't a good thing because you don't know who's going to be. So we'll see.
Well, look, it's absolutely lock it in right now and call it what it is. This is the lock of all these position group breakdowns. Millette, Ulmer, and Seguero will be on the offensive line, period. Like, we know that's going to happen. I mean, Seguero is the latest in Marshall centers to be on the Remington watch list. So the Herd has another good quality safety. He's returning back, or not safety, center. He's returning for a second year as the starting center. And Ulmer and Millette, they're just excellent offensive linemen. Billy Ross, you have to think he's going to get one of those remaining two open spots because he did play at UNC and he is good. I mean, he's an excellent offensive lineman, and it was a really good get for Marshall to get him back in Huntington. So if you're looking at, okay, Adams may or may not be on the roster, so let's just say for argument's sake that spot is open. There are some guys that have gotten some game over the past couple of years, but this is where that having a new coaching staff comes into play, having a new offensive line coach comes into play. This is where competition is going to cause these guys to have to elevate their game and vie for that last spot if there is one to be had. But some names that guys that you have probably seen or heard before would be guys like James McGee, a 6'3", 280-pound junior. He's played in several games for Marshall in reserve duty. Dalton Tucker, he's a huge mountain of a man, 6'7", 325-pound redshirt sophomore. He played quite a bit in various roles in games last year. Ethan Driscoll's another big one, 6'9", 314-pound youngster, redshirt freshman. Or is it going to be that transfer that we just talked about a little bit coming in from Purdue? Is he going to rise out of the pack? The 6'5", 293-pound redshirt sophomore Stephen Fauchot. Open competition to see who's going to I hate to say anchor that line, but it's the fifth spot on that line if, in fact, Adams isn't going to be there. It's a big question mark because, a lot of these guys have played a lot of ball together, so it may be a case of who comes in and has the best chemistry with the other four guys. Who can pick it up faster, who can play, who can do what Cramsey needs them to do to protect Grant Wells the best, who can open those holes for these running backs the best. But still, 4 out of 5 is pretty darn good. I don't find a weak spot anywhere in that line. I mean, we just talked about Alex Millette not giving up a sack in 400 snaps last year. So, good luck getting around him. Yep. And there are some premier pass rushers in Conference USA. It's not like it's just a bunch of guys that can't get to the quarterback. We know there's talent there. So, Ulmer and Seguero and Ross, you got to like what you got there. So whoever that fifth guy is, got a lot of hype to live up to. You got a high standard to maintain over the past decade or so that's been the Marshall offensive line. So we'll ultimately see who rises out of the pack. Trace, who are you most excited to see from this unit this year?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. I'll probably say Billy Ross just because, we know what we're going to get out of the three we've already mentioned. Those three are well-traveled individuals for the Herd. I mean, they played a lot of ball. Have just been extremely productive players for Marshall. And Billy Ross is a guy, like you said, very highly touted player. Not long ago, went to a major Power 5 school there, and now he's back in Huntington. playing for Marshall. I mean, it's pretty exciting, especially, and it come to, I think, the perfect time because we've mentioned the two guys that they lost, two first-team all-conference, one of them was a freaking All-American last year. So, I mean, that's hard to just come back from real immediately, but I think they have a decent shot at doing it because of Billy Ross. I mean, I think he's a super talented guy, and it shows from all the offers he got out of high school, and then the fact that he went to UNC. So I really want to see what he can do in green and white, especially with the talent around him and the rest of the other line around him. I think they'll all kind of feed off of each other. So I'll probably say Billy Ross for that one.
Yeah, but let's also take into account that this wasn't just a run-of-the-mill UNC team. This was a UNC team that was, stayed in the top 25, top 15. They were a really good quality team, and he was getting a lot of playing time along that line. So this is an excellent addition. For me, most excited to see. I think I have to go with you there because you have three absolute known entities in Millette, Ulmer, and Sagero. You know what you're going to get. That you just do. They are veteran offensive linemen that play at a very high level. And I hate to sound like, well, I'm just used to seeing them play at a high level, so I don't get excited. I do get excited about it. It's just that, like, I want to see how high they can be elevated, how high the unit as a whole can be elevated with an addition like Billy Ross. Because we know what it did when Josh Ball turned into the Josh Ball that we saw last year. We finally got comfortable with everything, and it was just like I don't know what to put it. Just like made that offensive line so stout, and I think Billy Ross has the potential to do the same thing.
Put him over the top.
Yeah. Bring them back to where they were last year. We've glossed over the fact that an All-American transferred out. I mean, we have freaking glossed over that like it's no big deal, when in fact it's a huge deal. So don't be fooled. Anytime you lose an All-American in anything, it's a big deal. But that's just how comfortable we feel with the depth of the Marshall offensive line. It's not like it was Kane Madden and everybody else, and he was doing everything. Like, he was just one of 5 guys that were highly productive. So he's great in his own right, and we wish him all the best at Notre Dame. I hope he kills it there. I hope he continues to be an All-American. I hope he turns into a first-round draft pick. Nothing but praise and good wishes and good vibes for the guy. But he was just one of 5 men that did an excellent job. So who do you think, I guess, along those lines, who's the biggest loss for you off of this line from last year?
Gosh, now that one, I mean,
tough, right?
Can we do a tie for that one?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's got to be a tie. I mean, both of those guys were 2 of the better offensive linemen Marshall's had in the last 20 years. I mean, it's been like a long time since they've had. I mean, the last time that they had an offensive lineman drafted was like, I think, 2003. And that was, before Josh Ball last year. And if Josh Ball would have been at, say, a Power 5 school, he's a first-round pick, easy. But because he's at Marshall, it was 4th round. But that's still pretty high praise for a Conference USA school to get a 4th-round draft pick at O-line. That doesn't happen very often. And then, of course, Kane Madden. I mean, everybody knows how great he was. 2nd-team All-American, I think, last year.
Right.
I mean, just huge. I mean, that is rarefied air for a Marshall player in general, let alone an offensive lineman. I mean, the guy's just an absolute superstar. He's going to make big headlines at Notre Dame. He's going to probably, if he's healthy and if he plays, up to the standard he's capable of playing, he'll be a first-round draft pick next year because now he'll have more eyes on him than ever before because he's playing for the Irish. So, it's got to be a tie. I mean, if you made me pick one, I probably would have flip-flopped back and forth. Like, I probably couldn't just stick with one, but it's definitely a tie for me.
Yeah, it's a fair statement. I mean, they're both huge losses, but it doesn't leave the cupboard bare, and which is so wild to think about. You lose a guy to the NFL, you lose an All-American to transfer, and you're still one of the best offensive lines units in the conference and in the G5 and nationally, because you still get ranked 56 in the country by Phil Steele. So pretty amazing stuff. I mean, we can't say that enough. The heartbeat of this team is generally the offensive line. The running backs run well. The wide receivers, are able to run routes because the quarterback is not rushed into throws. Plays are able to develop because Marshall has a quality offensive line. Teams opposing teams are often frustrated because of their lack of ability to get to the quarterback. And that goes right back to the offensive line. It's been a strong point for a long time, and I think it's going to continue to be that. So what about a breakout player this year for the unit? Trace, who's your guy? Who do you think? That's a tricky one, considering what all's going on.
Yeah, that is a really tricky one. You know, you mentioned I know we've even talked about how to pronounce his last name, but how do who you mentioned earlier, the transfer?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going with faux show because it's Faucheaau, so I'm going with that Cajun type pronunciation.
Yeah, I know.
Even though he's from Ohio, I'm still going with yeah. I'm going to church it up a little bit and go with faux show.
Hey, that sounds nice to me. I mean, I know not to make light of his name or anything, but like I know we've talked about it before. But that's probably who I would pick for this one, just because, I mean, like you said, I mean, what really, how can you really say Millette, Segura, or Ulmer's gonna have a breakout year? I mean, they could, don't get me wrong. I mean, Kane Madden had a breakout year last year, and he was a known entity at that point. And Josh Ball, same thing. But like, I'm thinking more along the lines of somebody that we're not, the common fans not aware of, but probably will be. So that's probably who I'd go with there. I mean, I could see that coming out of him. Show.
I've got two kind of answers for that. One, from a standpoint like you're talking about, somebody the common fan may not really know about or be expecting to have a bigger role in the unit. Oh my goodness! Excuse me. For that player, I think it's got to be whoever fills that fifth spot on the offensive line, if in fact it's not Tariq Adams or Tarek Adams, which, I'd like to know how that's going to iron out. But whoever that fifth spot is going to be the guy that breaks out because, most fans are already going to know everything they need to know about Millette, Ulmer, and Salguero, and they've already got a preconceived notion of what Billy Ross is going to be like. So they're going to be expecting a high level of play from him. So it's whoever that fifth guy is got to be the breakout player for me. But on a flip side of that, the breakout player in a different way is going to be Will Ulmer, and he's already broken out in a little bit of a way in terms of the NIL rules, and that's where I think is a different kind of thing because we know Will's trying to start a music career and be able to play and use his own name, and now he can do that. And the guy was on Good Morning America talking about that stuff. He was like in the news cycle circling all that. It was always, his picture when the NIL stuff was breaking. So he's my breakout player from a different standpoint off the field, because I know what he can do on the field, but off the field, I think you may see him break out in a completely different way. And I really hope it does. I hope all the bright lights and the lure of the stage just is everything he hopes it will be. So I hope that Will breaks out in that way off the field. When it's all said and done, Trace, who do you think is going to be the MVP of the unit?
Yeah, I went back and forth between two different guys here, but I'm going to go with Will Ulmer. I'm going to go with Ulmer. I mean, you can't go wrong with Millette or Salguero, but I mean, especially Millette, considering, like you said, the advanced stats that we read on him earlier. I mean, that's just impressive stuff. I mean, and the whole line, I think PFF, the whole line was like third last year in like production or something, offensive line. I know it was only behind a couple people. I think it was like BYU and Buffalo, I think, or something like that. But like the whole line was spectacular. But I'm going to go with Will Ulmer. I just feel like, I don't know, just a little different vibe from him this year heading into the season. And a lot of it is because of his, trying to get his music career out there and, a lot more prominence on social media and things like that. And I think that'll really pay off. I think that's going to, provide a new level of leadership for him and the whole line. Just wanting to really step out, make a name for yourself, and in turn make a name for your team and your unit. I feel like that's a good thing, and he's representing Marshall really well with that. And I mean, the guy's been a workhorse for several years now, and I expect more of the same. And I mean, that's what's going to happen, barring anything crazy. So I'm going to go with Will Ulmer. I mean, it really could be any of the three returning, stars that we've talked about, but something about Ulmer this year is striking me a little different, so I'm going to go with him.
Yeah, that's an excellent pick. I've just been zeroed in on Millette for months now, and it's really been because of that one stat that PFF put out, because that just kind of slips by you, unless you're just love offensive line stats and you're checking in on them every week. No Marshall fan knew that about Millette, and that has just boggled my mind ever since it came out. So I'm just choosing him as my MVP from the unit, just period. I'm doing that. 400 snaps without a sack given up. Why not do that again, right? If you can do it over the course of one season, you can do it over the course of another. So Alex Millette's going to be my guy for MVP of the unit this year. It's hot take time, Trace, and that's a toughie. Some questions that we haven't had to answer before. So last year we were talking about a new center, first-year starter at center, and now we don't have that anymore, but we do have to replace some huge pieces off of that offensive line. But we believe the pieces are there to do that effectively. So what's your hot take for the Herd offensive line in 2021?
I thought about this before the show started, and I couldn't quite come up with anything good, or at least I didn't at that point. But I think what I'm going to go with is this offensive line is directly tied in with the running game. The running game, they will rush for more yards behind this offensive line this year than they did last year. And that's without Knox, and that's without a couple of major stars on the O-line. That's my hot take. I mean, I think they're going to be great, protecting Grant Wells. I mean, they were last year. I don't know the numbers and the stats on the sacks they allowed, but I know it was really good. That's what I think, because especially with the kind of stable of backs that they're going to probably feature more this year. I feel like they'll rush for more yards this year because of that O-line than they did last year with a superstar running back. I mean, it kind of ties into, but the running backs too. But I think that's more indicative of the O-line, especially because there's not, they don't have Knox now, and I think that's more the O-line's going to have to really lead the charge for the running back. So that's my hot take. It's a fair take. I think, it's not anything too crazy, but it's definitely a strong possibility.
No, with what we know about having to at least have two new positions filled, two guys are going to be new to that line, no matter what, whether they're have played ball and are really productive or coming from transfer or that they're already on the roster, whatever the case may be. There are two starters from that line that are gone from a year ago. And that's still going to have to leave some probably drop in production at some point, but I still think that they're going to be highly, highly effective and efficient. So my hot take for the offensive line unit in 2021 is that they will average less than 1.5 sacks allowed per game over the course of the season. I wish I could give you a number, but I have no idea how many games will actually get played. So that's why I'm going with an average. I think this offensive line will average less than 1.5 sacks allowed per game. So hang with us on the other side of this break. We're going to talk about Herd running backs, and you heard Trace talk about it. Brendan Knox is not in Huntington anymore. Defensive coordinator's sigh of relief was heard across the conference when he decided to declare for the draft. So we got some questions to be answered. Hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
Evans still the running back to the left of Wells on 1st and goal from the 5. Gets the handoff, skips through, reaches over the goal line. Touchdown, Marshall. Sheldon Evans. He's not the number one go-to, but he's pretty good as well. Marshall cruising early.
Trace, it's time to talk Herd running backs, another position of strength for the last 4, 5, 6 years. And I don't think we've had bigger questions to be answered that we have this year than in years past. Brendan Knox is gone. Point flat out, the all-timer, one of the greatest to ever tote the rock in a Herd uniform, is gone. Leaves a huge production void for rushing yards on this roster. There's just no way around it. I mean, the guy had way more than the lion's share of carries and production last year. The cupboard, of course, is not bare, a term that we use a lot, but it is what it is. You're fooling yourself if you think that, Marshall will be 100% okay. You just don't replace Brendan Knox. Somebody's going to have to break out. Two guys are going to have to break out in a big way to replace Brendan Knox. But to be fair, Brendan Knox burst on the scene of a guy late in the season, replacing a dude that was injured, and the rest is history. So Phil still ranks this unit a very disrespectful 10th in the conference. 10th. Ouch. That's got to stick in the craw of Charles Huff, who is a running backs coach most recently before this head coaching gig at Marshall. So that's got to be a point of emphasis for him. That's something that's very near and dear to him. He's put guys in the NFL like year after year. Some of the bigger names in the NFL were his guys. And, to come in here in a situation and have your running back unit disrespected to the tune of 10th in Conference USA, that's rough. That's a tough pill to swallow. Total guys on the Herd Zone roster running back wise is 7. So there's a lot of guys to choose from. In the portal, it was nobody came in. The Herd lost a couple of guys. G-Money Wilson went to East Carolina, who will now face the Herd, I guess, when the Pirates are on the schedule here in a couple of weeks. And Cedric Wilcox transferred out. According to 24/7 Sports, does not have a landing spot. And if he does, it's just not on their website. And of course, the biggest loss, the only loss outside the portal is Brendan Knox to the NFL, landed in Dallas, which I got mixed feelings about, but that's a pro sports kind of talk. I'm definitely not a Dallas fan, but I am a Brendan Knox fan. So I hope he gets 1 billion yards and they lose by 100 every week. That'd be fine by me. Running backs, Trace. This is a tough one. This is a unique situation. What are your thoughts on this running back situation for the Herd in 2021 with Brendan Knox gone?
It's definitely interesting. I mean, it's definitely one of the, if not the biggest question mark heading into the season, just because Knox is just, like you said, all-timer. I mean, that's the best word you can give him. I mean, the guy, a couple years ago had 300 carries or close to 300 carries. I mean, you don't see that very often. I mean, this guy is just an absolute workhorse, stud. I mean, that's just the best word for him. He's a stud, and he's gone. And you never know how it's going to be trying to replace a guy like that. I mean, Marshall's had to do that in the past with other guys, running backs especially. But and like you said before, now it's a little more unknown this year, but the cupboard is not bare. It's not. I mean, they have a very reliable, highly thought of backup running back, Sheldon Evans, who's considered arguably the best leader on the whole team. We heard that all last year, and for a good reason. He is, that's just his personality. Hearing him talk, he just sounds like he's a leader. He just sounds like he knows what's going on. And now, will he be able to handle the lion's share of the carries if he's first string? Everybody, I think we all assume he's going to be first string, but a couple other guys behind him, Lawrence Papillon and Knowledge McDaniel are going to be leaned on heavily. And I know we've all said it, especially on this podcast, that we're excited to see Knowledge McDaniel and see what he can do. And that's one of the big storylines I have coming out of this unit this year is what can Knowledge McDaniel do if he's given, more carries. And, he kind of runs similar to Knox, kind of downhill. He's not afraid of contact. He's hard to take down. So I'd like to see what he can do. But Sheldon Evans, I mean, he's a pretty known entity at this point. So I don't think the unit is 10th in the conference, put it that way. Would I give it, middle of the pack, 7th, 6th-ish? Sure. I mean, that's fair. They don't really, you don't know if they have a number one running back they can count on yet. But I don't think they're 10th. Let's just put it that way.
No, definitely not. No. I'm with you. I can't put them, 1, 2, or 3 just because the production isn't there. Across the unit, it's not there. Now, by the end of the year, could you have 3 or 4 guys that are just mind-bogglingly good? Yeah, absolutely you could. But in fairness, it hasn't been done yet. So there are guys on other teams that are already proven entities. The finest running back in the league right now is in San Antonio. Sincere McCormick is awesome. He's gonna play on Sundays. I mean, you can't take anything away from the guy just because we talk about Western Kentucky and Marshall all the time. He's proven to be one of the better backs, if not the best back in the conference. Now, at the end of the day, or at the end of the season, when you come up for air and the dust settles and you look at all the stats, is one of these guys on the roster completely capable of outrushing what McCormick does? Yes, for sure, because there's so many variables that go into that. Will one stay healthy versus the other? Will the offensive lines be better than the other? Well, who knows what will happen, but this is not a, oh my God, what do we do situation. Brendan Knox is gone. You said it. Sheldon Evans is a bona fide leader and has been on this team. And when your RB2 is team leader 1 or one of those team leaders, team captain type guy, it just says so much, because he goes to work every day knowing he's not going to get that many carries. And if you're unwavered by that, if that doesn't bother you, if you're a true team guy, then when it's finally your turn, as it looks like 2021 may be finally his turn, how motivated and excited are you finally to be able to show what you can do consistently? And the better part about that is you don't have to carry the football 250 times, because there are guys further down the depth chart from 2020 that will also be getting carries in 2021. But let's talk about these guys. Sheldon Evans, 5'11", 200-pound redshirt junior. He had 72 carries last year, 327 yards, good for 4.5 yards a clip, and 4 touchdowns on the ground in pretty limited type action. Also returned kicks, but I don't really see that in his repertoire this year, especially if you're talking about him being the RB1. That may be left up to some of these younger guys like Papillon, who we've seen return kicks in the past. Maybe Rasheen Ali, who had a pretty good spring game, if you'll remember. Kind of popped up on the radar for a lot of fans. Knowledge McDaniel, both of us have been overly outspoken about, we want to see this guy get more carries. And when he's had the ball, he's done amazing things with it. 5'11", 218-pound sophomore, only 35 carries last year, which we knew was a low number. I didn't think it was 35. I thought it was a little bit higher than that, but he managed to tally 212 yards, which is 6.1 yards per carry, and he had 2 touchdowns on the ground in just those 35 carries. If you can extrapolate that out to 150 carries on the year, I mean, think of the production you're going to get. Multiply that by, that's 1,000-yard rusher, right there. Man, that's pretty good stuff. Rasheen Ali, a guy I just mentioned, the 6 foot, 200-pound redshirt freshman, only 5 carries last year, just 22 yards, 4.4 yards per carry, did not find the end zone, but a guy that a lot of people are really high on. His potential to break out and be a lot of people are calling him potentially the most talented in the group. It's just a matter of how much game time, how many carries will he see? And of course, you mentioned Lawrence Papillon, 5'9", 200-pound redshirt sophomore, 10 carries last year, 38 yards, 3.8 yards per carry, and he did find the end zone 1 time. So there are guys that have had game, there are guys that have had carries, but of those 4 guys we mentioned, it's like, what is it, 100, 110, 117, 122 combined carries for those 4 guys. Not even close to 600 yards total rushing. So the production just isn't there. They've got to prove themselves. If we think that Sheldon Evans will be the RB1, at least let's say this way, at least week 1, when they run out of the tunnel week 1, Sheldon Evans is probably going to get the first carry as a running back. He's earned that. So beyond that, who do you think is the first guy off the bench? Who's the second running back to get a carry? That type of thing. Who do you think it's going to be?
Who do I think it's going to be?
Yeah, of course.
Is trickier than who I think it should be.
Well, I mean, I don't mean is Sheldon Evans getting the first 2 carries. I mean the second different running back to get a carry. Who do you think it's going to be?
Yeah. Well, you made a good case for a lot of guys right there. I mean, Rasheen Ali, yeah, I mean, but I think he's got a lot of potential. And, it depends. I haven't really been reading any updates, of anything of what certain coaches think of running backs or whatever. I don't know who they really prefer outside of Evans, but I'll just tell you this much for sure. It'll be Knowledge McDaniel if it was me. I mean, but it's not me. So I don't exactly know. But I mean, you can't really, if we're a number 2 running back, I mean, the running back depth chart's going to shift so much this year anyway, from game to game. It really doesn't even matter. I mean, Papillon's going to get carries. McDaniel's going to get carries. Ali's going to get carries. So, it really doesn't matter. But me, that's who I'd go with, McDaniel. That would be my number 2.
Yeah, we use these terms, and I think by now our listeners are so familiar with the way that Marshall handles its roster and the way they do things that we just use terms like running back 1 and running back 2 just for speaking purposes. It really doesn't mean that much. I mean, yeah, Evans and McDaniel, whatever, may get the first, the 2 most amount of carries, but it doesn't mean that Ali or Papillon or even the other 3 guys on the roster right now aren't going to see any action. I mean, that situational type things pop up, injuries occur, all these kind of things, all these variables happen. So, I want to see Knowledge McDaniel on the field. I said it. Okay. I'm a fan. He just captivated my attention last year in that limited action, and I wanted to see more. But what are you going to do? Are you going to take an all-timer off the field? Of course not. Of course not. Coaches coach to win games. You don't take your best running back off the field just because a young guy's doing really well. You just kind of have to wait your turn. And now he and McDaniel and Evans are right here neck and neck, in my opinion. I mean, they're 2 different types of backs. Sheldon Evans has sneaky speed. He looks like more of a bruising back and a hard hitter to run through you instead of around you type guy, but he's still able to get around you, over you, or through you, and then run away from you. So don't be fooled. He looks very much like the running style of Brendan Knox. They're built sort of the same, kind of low to the ground, low center of gravity type guys, whereas McDaniel, to me, even though they're both listed at 5'11", McDaniel to me seems like more of a stand-up type of runner. He doesn't run as low to the ground, in just from what I've seen. I mean, he may, but the way my eyes saw it, they just looked like different running styles and equally effective. So, I hope he's the second running back to get a carry, because he just dazzled with his potential last year. But Ali really intrigues me. Granted, I haven't seen him at all, but I read various outlets, and you try to keep tabs on the message boards and who's talking about what, and people that actually go to practice in person and things like that. So, they get eyes on the guy, and when they say, wow, he's really talented, like really talented, at the end of the day, he could be the one that's everybody's like, wow, that's intriguing to me. And I want to see how that plays out in full game speed action against real competition. And of course, Papillon, we've seen him. He can move the chains. He can pick up the yards if you need him. So Marshall's got 4 really solid guys that they can choose from right now. They're by no means hurting. But there are 3 other backs on the roster. We're going to talk about them real quick. A trio of freshmen. Ethan Payne, 6'1", 216-pound freshman from right down the road from Huntington. And Polka, local kid. You love to have those West Virginia boys on your roster. Fans really rally around that. We can't say that enough. This is just that type of school to where the local kids can come and shine, and people really take a liking to them. Kevin Henderson, a 5'9", 170-pound junior. And then Arthur Rogers, a 5'8", 211-pound freshman. 7 guys all told, but look, let's not fool ourselves. These 3 young men that I just mentioned, they're going to have to pay their dues. They'll be playing special teams. They'll be doing whatever's asked of them. Probably not too many carries are going to come their way from a running back standpoint this year. With all that being said, though, Trace, who are you most excited to see out of this unit?
Yeah, I mean, the reoccurring name that we're going to hear a lot. I think I'm most excited to see Knowledge McDaniel, because we've seen a lot of Sheldon Evans. I mean, Rasheen Ali, I could have said him too, because like you said, he's kind of an unknown entity at running back at this point, but a lot of hype around him by a lot of different people. So there's a possibility there. But I'd like to see McDaniel just for the simple fact that he had 35 carries last year. I mean, yeah, I'd like to see at least 3 or 4 times that. I mean, that's what I'd like to see. Barring anything. Of course, if Sheldon Evans has a huge year, then yeah, feed him the rock. And I am excited to see him as RB1. I'm excited to see all these guys that we mentioned, but I'm especially excited to see McDaniel just because I really think the potential is off the charts with this guy, especially if he's given the ball more. So that's where I am with this, but it really could have been any of the 3 we've already talked about.
Yeah. I'm most excited to see, number one, Sheldon Evans as the featured back week 1, game 1, what have you. It's his time to shine. So from a beginning of the season standpoint, I'm excited to see him cash in on his opportunity to be the man in the backfield and start a game, or start a season, I mean. But the player I'm absolutely most excited to see is Knowledge McDaniel. I can't say that enough. I just want to see what the guy can do with more carries. I mean, 2 touchdowns off 35 carries. That's roughly 1 every 17 carries. For context, Brendan Knox had 9 touchdowns on the ground with off of 185 carries. So that was roughly like 1 almost every 20 carries. So kind of in that same cloth, but we'll see what they can do. This is the biggest slam dunk of all of them, Trace. Who's the biggest loss from the unit from a year ago?
Let's go, Brendan Knox.
Yeah, it's the NFL running back that's the biggest loss from the unit. I mean,
played last night in the Hall of Fame game there.
Oh, did he? I was working. How did he do?
I didn't actually see it live, but like I saw a Barstool tweeted like his stats. He didn't have a whole lot of carries, but he got in the second half.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I saw that Josh Ball did not travel, or did not travel to play in that game. So it was Knox was the only hope for the herd in that game last night. So
yeah, but
good for him for at least having an opportunity and cashing in on that opportunity. That's what it's all about in the NFL.
Yep.
Who's your breakout player? I mean, there's 4 guys here that could have a breakout year because none of them are absolute known lethal threats yet. We know they can do damage, but none of them have had to do it as a featured back yet. Who's your pick?
Yeah, I think this one I'll probably go with Sheldon Evans just because of what you just said. Now he's the featured back. Now he's the RB1 of the group. Now he's the one that's expected to carry the load of Brendan Knox, and I think he's going to break out. I mean, we've seen him over the last couple of years be a really solid player. I mean, we know that. I mean, you can't put a price on having a really solid number 2 running back. But now, can that really solid number 2 running back be a great number 1 running back? That's the question, and I think he can be. I mean, I'd like to see him. I'd like to see him push, depending on if they play a full season, which I don't. But hopefully they do. I think they probably will. But depending on if they play a full season or not, I'd like to see him push 1,000 yards. I mean, that'd be great. I mean, is it doable? Sure. Will it happen? Who knows? But I'd like to see him, have the ability, or not the ability, the capability and the opportunity to do that. That's what I'd like to see. So I think the breakout would be probably Evans. But like I said, we're going to keep beating the dead horse. It could be any of the guys we've already said.
We're in a situation now to where nobody has proven that much that any one guy stands out as the year that he's going to break out right now. So it could be any one of these 4 guys that we've talked about at length. The only, real quick though, before I get into who I think mine is, I looked up the stats last night on the Dallas game, and Brendan Knox had 4 carries for 12 yards. So, hey, not too bad. I think the breakout players, it has to be Sheldon Evans. It has to be. Because the story kind of writes itself. He's been such a good leader on this team. He's been such a good, worker, a good teammate, a good all this kind of stuff. And it just seems like the universe needs to give him all the accolade for that in a good season. So I feel like he's, you get told like you do everything the right way and good things will happen for you. And I feel like he's been doing things the right way for so long that now it's time for him to, reap the benefit of doing things the right way, going to work every day, putting your head down, busting your butt, doing what's asked of you, playing your role, being supportive, all that kind of stuff. And now it's your turn to break out. So give me Sheldon Evans. Who's the MVP of the group? This is good. This is totally different. It doesn't have to be the guy who rushed for the most yards. I mean, this could be the clutchest guy who just came through time after time. This guy might tally 200 yards on the year, but he scored 6 go-ahead touchdowns with a minute to go. So who's the MVP of the unit for you this year?
I'm gonna stick with Sheldon Evans. I mean, not only because of what he'll do on the stat sheet, but what he'll continue to do in the locker room and on the sideline. I think that's where he's head and shoulders above the rest for this unit. I mean, if you want to, say, well, I think Ollie's as talented, or if you think, I think McDaniel's as talented, or this or that, that's one thing. But those guys have not proven to be the leader that Sheldon Evans has proven to be so far. I mean, maybe they'll develop into that. You never know. But for right now, I'm rolling with the guy. I mean, what's the saying? If you're in a foxhole with somebody,
right?
Who would you want to have in there with you? Sheldon.
Right.
Sheldon Evans. That's the guy I'd want in there, especially with Knox gone. He's the one that's going to have the most pressure on his shoulders, the most weight on his shoulders, and I think he's going to pass with flying colors.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's the guy on the field and like you said, in the locker room. That's even bigger. So these young guys that need brought along a little bit, who better to have than a guy that's been a bona fide leader, not just in the running back room, but for the entire team. He's been a leader, and just a great situation for young backs to learn from a guy like that. If he doesn't have, I don't know what his future holds. I don't know if he's even interested in entertaining a career after football. I don't know what a football career after college is what I should have said. Who knows? But man, if he doesn't have all the makings of a good coach right now, then what player does? Because these guys like him that show the leadership qualities that he has and is coaching up and is a great teammate. And you hope you get 100 of those on your roster every year. So yeah, give me Sheldon Evans as the MVP too. And it's really less about yards and what he means to the team as a leader and a trendsetter and, all those good things. All right. Hot take time. I'd love to know what you got locked and loaded for the running backs in 2021. What's your hot take?
Well, my hot take is forget that preseason 10th ranking. At the end of the year, this unit is going to be top 3 in the conference in rushing yards. Top 3.
Top 3 in total rushing yards by the team.
Yes. And if you want to look at maybe yards per carry, they might even be they might be top 3 in that too. Top 3 in rushing yards. I almost said, Evans would have 1,000 yards, and that could still be the case. But I'm saying, as an overall unit, because I think they're all going to get their carries, they will be at least top 3 in the conference in rushing yards. And that plays into the offensive line thing, like you talked about earlier, too. So that's my hot take. And, I feel like if that turns out to be the case, then that's more than exceeding expectations, after the season. So,
yeah, that 10th ranking, dude, that's really, I mean, I know coaches don't really probably pay attention to that kind of stuff, but if you glance at that and you're like, man, this is a bunch of bull crap. I mean, that's a thing from the top down that's going to stick in your craw. My hot take for the unit is they're going to land somebody. Now, look, I'm going off of the fact that I talked about Sincere McCormick earlier for UTSA. He's a great back, guys. I mean, he's a great back. Just because he plays for a West Division team and yada, 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 and you don't really care and blah, 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 doesn't mean he's not any good. So I'm just going to default that he will have a spectacular season this year and be a first-team all-conference back. So I'm going to say one of these Marshall backs is going to land on the Conference USA, all-Conference USA second team. And I might even go out on a limb here and say that Rasheen Ali will land on the all-freshman team. Let's say that. So that's about as high praise as I can get. I just have to default to McCormick because he's proven himself to be a first team all conference caliber back. So I think, the ceiling, barring anything crazy happening for the herd backs, is the second team all conference. So give me that, and we'll see where it all shakes out at the end of the season. Trace, another spectacular episode, chock full of killer information and excellent analysis. So what do you got for final thoughts this week, as the first day of summer camp has opened yesterday? So exciting stuff. Football is close. What do you got? Final thoughts?
Yeah, that's exciting right there. I mean, just the thought of we're only about a month out from Marshall football, that is extremely exciting. And, it's a time of change, a new coach, a new new team essentially. Just a totally different vibe around the program. It's exciting stuff. But as far as the units we've talked about tonight, I mean, I'm not worried about the O-line at all. Flat out, I'm not. I mean, yeah, they've lost 2 superstars, 2 NFL players, but I'm not worried about the O-line. That's about the only that's probably the only unit, one of maybe only like 2 units that I'm not worried about. Like, have literally no worries at all. I mean, the Knights might be a little bold because, like I said, Ball and Madden are gone, but like I'm just not worried about that unit. And the running back unit, I mean, there's some question marks around that because now you don't have your workhorse superstar first team running back anymore. But I'm not overly concerned about that unit either. I mean, I think that it's just going to be. I think the only problem that this unit will have is trying to decide who is that number 1 running back, possibly. Who is like the one go-to. I mean, I think it will probably be Sheldon Evans, and I think most people think that, but like the guy's going to be in a totally different situation this year. But I think he'll be fine. I mean, but that's really the only major thing that I think that they have, going against them is they don't have a solidified number 1, for sure number 1 running back. I mean, they got good depth, and we know that. So, and the running back unit always has good depth. So I think that's really the only big concern there. So I think both of these units will be in good shape at the end of the year. I really do.
Yeah, it looks like business as usual. I hate to just be kind of cavalier about the whole thing because there are huge names that are gone. Kane Madden, Josh Ball, and Brendan Knox. That's 3 of the biggest names that were on this roster last year that are gone. And it's just from the 2 units we're talking about here. That we're not even into the Devontae Beckett's gone and the Darius Hodges gone yet. We haven't even talked about those units. But 3 of the biggest names production-wise on this roster are gone. And still, we feel like, it's not that huge of a deal because the depth was there, the talent was there, and like you just don't take these guys off the field just to put somebody else in. Like they earned the right to be there, so they stay there until they end their careers or they get beaten out, and nobody beat them out. So with another year of development, you've got guys that now are in a position to vie for these spots and play at a high level. We talked about many, many times over the course of the past few months about like, wow, man, which position are you most concerned about with Marshall? And really the only thing that we did talk about was, well, we're not 200% on how these running backs are going to look. And like you said, there was a lot of talent there. There's a lot of depth there, but nobody had proven that they were the guy over the course of an entire season because nobody had to. Brendan Knox always did that. And, we saw it in recent history with Knox himself. Like I said before, he came out of nowhere, and Marshall fans were like, oh, great, man. What are we going to do now? Like Tyler King got hurt and we got to rely on a guy that we've never seen before. And bam, like gangbusters. It was like, whoa, where did this guy come from? So maybe that guy is right there on the roster again. And we get to talk about it all over again. But I feel great about the offensive line. Ulmer, Millette, Salguero, no worries whatsoever. Billy Ross has already played a lot of ball. It's coming from the UNC program. He's familiar with the area, so he's coming home again. There's a lot to be said about coming home again. And then it's basically who's your 5th guy? Who's going to fit the best with the other 4 guys and what they got going on? I just feel really good about it. So, Trace, until we can come back in here, probably next week, at the end of the week, we'll figure out. Trace will tell me what position groups we're going to come back with next week. So I can't really break it to you right now. But take us out, man. And we'll get out of here for another week.
Go Herds.
Go Tops. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
Might as well be.